Welcome in, Braves Today, bravestoday.com. He is Lindsay Crosby. I am Ben Taylor, and it is all brought to you by Plains Coffee, plainscoffee.com. Promo code Braves, get your 10% off. And Lindsay, the series was a win. It was not a sweep, which means I don't have to pick a sweep this time around, although I still might do that, but we shall see. We'll have picks at the end. But I think the big telling story of the weekend was Travis d'Arnaud and his hot bat. And I was so proud of Chris Sale even for saying that in the postgame. He said, listen, you can talk about pitching all you want. The guy that we need to be talking about is d'Arnaud.
Yeah, and not the exact quote. I didn't pull it up, but Chris Sale was like, nobody cares about the pitching. Nobody cares about if the fan beat the freeze or not. We're all here to talk about Travis. It's like, right. Yes, we are. 3 home runs on Friday, including a grand slam, another home run on Saturday. Travis d'Arnaud was the last Braves catcher to hit 3 home runs in a game since Dale Murphy.
Wow.
If that's who, I believe that's the jersey behind you there. Yes. if that's any sort of inclination of how big this night was. He's one of, I believe the stat was 3. I have it in the takeaways from that game, but 3 catchers in MLB history have had 3 homer games. He's one of the 3. It's absurd. And the Sunday Night Baseball broadcast, really great job because nobody on the Braves beat had this, including me. But they told a story on the Sunday Night Baseball broadcast about his late grandfather. That was his grandfather's birthday on Friday night when he hit the home runs. So just an amazing night. And a dude that, he's now like second on the team in homers after one weekend. And it just shows, as much as we're concerned about the power production of Ronald Acuna Jr., I wrote that story on Monday morning and on Sunday morning. And some of those other things, one hot weekend can completely turn it around like it did for Travis d'Arnaud.
Yeah, and you mentioned Ronald Acuna Jr., and they even brought that up on the Sunday night broadcast where they talked about how his power numbers aren't there, but Riley and Olson have said he's right around the corner. It's going to happen. Yeah. And I do believe that. I think we're getting to the point where he may be pressing a little bit but he's still hitting the ball hard. He did so on the Sunday night game. He had a couple of hits there. I'd like to see some more production with runners in scoring position, but that's with everybody. That's not just with him. But I think he also was not getting, and I don't know if this is because Michael Harris Jr. is not, or Michael Harris II's not batting in front of him on that second time through the lineup, but he doesn't seem to be getting those pitches right down. He does the first at bat where they're trying to get ahead of him, but after that, everything he's squaring up, he's doing so on the outer half, up and out, down and in. Nothing's right across the center of the plate like he got last year.
So I did a StatCast search on Sunday morning, and going into Sunday night's game, Ronald Acuna Jr. is seeing the highest percentage of elevated fastballs that he's ever seen in his career. So pitchers are specifically making a point to get the ball out of the strike zone against him and either throw it outside, throw it in on him because that's the book you throw in on Ronald Acuna Jr., or elevate the fastball and make him go up to try to get it and try to hit a homer off of that. And it's if you elevate it well enough and it's a ball or 2 balls up above the strike zone, it's hard to turn on those pitches and send them out for home runs just because it's so high up in the air. So, teams are pitching him differently. His strikeout rate reflects this new strategy he has to adjust to. It's a higher strikeout rate than he's had in the past. He's at like 1.1% homer rate, which is by far the lowest of his career. He was like 4 and change last year. So some adjustments coming, but kind of to the point of what Riley and Olson said. He's hitting the crap out of the ball. He's making quality, he's hitting the ball hard. It's just a matter of adjusting those minute adjustments. Remember the whole thing with Austin Riley was changing his sights by 2 ball widths. That was the whole big change they had to make to have him launch home runs. I feel like Ronald's that close to doing that just because he's having to adjust those fastballs being a little bit farther up or outside than he got last year. We're close.
Yes, exactly. And now on the other end of the spectrum, Matt Olson, you just mentioned his name, is having an Ozuna-type season from 2023.
Last year's Ozuna, not this year's Ozuna.
Last year's Ozuna.
A start to the season for Ozuna, yeah.
He is the 2024 version of 23 Marcell Ozuna at this point. It's actually not that bad. So I know we're going to get the comments that are sitting down there underneath, but it is pretty putrid compared to what his numbers usually are. And you threw those numbers at me, and I was absolutely shocked. Out of the last 6/12 games that he's played, as well as the month of April in general.
Yeah, he is 1 for 20 in his last 6 games. And then, so his only hit in the last 2 series against the teams in Texas was the opener against Houston. He hasn't got a hit since then. And I believe if I did this right, in the last 12 games, he's 8 for 45 with 17 strikeouts. So not great. It's the strikeout pace that we saw when he was batting second last year. That first 68 games, they moved him 1 game too early. Batted like 228 with like 90-something strikeouts. He's kind of on that strikeout pace, although he's batting in his cleanup spot. I think he's going to be fine. I don't think this is a long-term thing. I think this is a little bit of a cold spell, a little bit of pitchers just being so cognizant of we can't let Matt Olson beat us. That, we can't let Austin Riley beat us. We can't let Matt Olson beat us. And then Marcell Ozuna beats them from the 5 spot. Or Orlando Arcia beats them from the 6 spot. And so he's going to fix it. I'm not too worried about it. It's just a question of when does it happen. I think the Miami Marlins are a great team to get right against. I say that. They've got 2 lefty starters going up in their first 2 games. And he historically has not done as well against lefties as he has righties. So maybe not the best one to get right there. But I think he's this close, just like Ronald Acuna Jr., to having another break. And what's it say about this Braves team? I also wrote this story on Sunday morning. What's it say about this Braves team that they're still number 1 in runs per game? Yes. They're number 1 in OPS and in slugging and all of that, despite these starts from Ronald Acuna Jr., from Matt Olson and all of that. They're still the best offense in baseball, despite all those things.
Yeah, they're still averaging 6 runs a game. I know the Sunday night game they didn't get before, but still, the fact that you average 6 runs a game, I mean, that's
more than they averaged last year. That's higher than it was. Last year's offense was one of the greatest we've ever seen.
Right. With guys slumping, they're averaging 6 runs a game. So, and I told you, and this is another rant that's completely separate from everything that we've talked about.
Before you do that rant, on the other note, Jared Kelenic is like top 5 in baseball for sweet spot percentage. Like he's hitting the ball exactly the right launch angles you want to hit it at. Doesn't have a home run yet. Some of that's the exit velocity hasn't been enough. Some of that's been some bad luck, some wind and things like that. But like that dude doesn't have a home run yet. And he had like 5 of the longest home runs of the year last year. And you're still the number 1 offense in baseball. You lost Ozzie Albies. You lost Sean Murphy. You're still the number 1 offense in baseball. That's the ceiling of this team. If you think about, this is not necessarily their floor. We saw their floor in the postseason, but this is a not fully formed offense, and they're the number 1 offense in baseball. So, okay.
Yeah, no,
Go ahead.
Well, you brought up Kelenic. I mean, that's one right there. I mean, he gets robbed a couple of times as far as the Sunday evening game is concerned. So that's another thing. He's hitting the ball hard, and he's hitting it not right at people, but people are making great plays on him, and diving catches, and they got him shifted the right way. They're grabbing stuff in the hole where any other time that'd be a base hit. Or if anybody were on ahead of him, it would be a base hit because they wouldn't be able to play that shift. So, I'm with you on Kelenic. I think honestly, I think the only place the Braves can go, I mean, I know we saw what they did in the playoffs, but still right now, if you get people clicking, they could go up. That's hard to believe they can go from averaging 6 runs a game.
They can get better.
8, they could get better. It could be 8 or 9, which is insane in Major League Baseball. Now, as I told you, my little mini rant here is the fact that we're playing all these American League teams, and there's a combination. Lindsay has a rant and I have a rant. Mine is the American League teams, so I'm totally okay with them not hitting the ball right now. And the reason being is because you're not playing anybody in the division. Now, I don't want to lose ground. I still want to be up there at the top, but the fact that you're playing nothing but you've got Seattle coming up. You got the Guardians that are coming up. Of course, it's the Marlins. This is Lindsay's complaint. We're playing the Marlins for the second time, and it seems like in 5 days. So I'm so over this scheduling thing, man.
Yeah, your complaint's very much the old school. Like you see these teams in the World Series, and that's it. But like there is something to that. The reason they're doing it, and you've acknowledged, like the reason they're doing it is so that you get meaningful games in the division late in the year. Like I get that. I understand that. It still is frustrating to be like, yeah, you play the Astros and the Rangers, 2 teams from Texas in the same week, and now you're done with these 2 teams for the whole season, but yet like you've barely played your own division, right? Like you haven't played Washington at all. And then my complaint, you're about to play the Marlins a second time, despite having not played Washington at all.
Yeah.
And it's like you're facing. Thankfully, this was at least a week and a half apart. I remember last year, I think it was the Brewers series. It was like back-to-back weekends. One was in Milwaukee, one was in Atlanta. At least this is separated by a week and a half or so, because the final game of that series was the 14th. The next game's the 22nd, so 8 days. There's a little bit more space than just back-to-back weekends, but you're playing the same team twice in the span of 2 weeks. But yet, you've played a bunch of American League teams, and you haven't seen the Nationals once. It's like, come on. Give us a little more balanced schedule as far as spread out these divisional games. Like, find a way to put the Nationals here versus Miami so that you could have played the entire division in the first month of the season. Like, that makes sense to me. But nope, let's play the Marlins twice. That's fine.
Play the Marlins twice.
The good thing is they're bad. So
yes. They are. Now we did it. You mentioned the Brewers. It felt like we did it with the Mets last year too, just because that was when Winans was making his charge up, and he had to face him. It seemed
back
like
to back,
in a week and a half he had to
face
him.
It was.
So that's another reason I don't like it, especially, and that's me just kind of pissing and moaning because it's the Braves and the injuries and the pitching injuries that we've got thus far. But when you call guys up and you get Vines coming up and you get Elders going to be coming up and you got Winans that come, you're putting these guys in positions where they can't succeed because they're pitching against the same team twice and in the span of 2 weeks. So again, rant over. We need to talk about some coffee. So go to plainscoffee.com and be sure to enter the promo code BRAVES. Get your 10% off. You can have the coffee delivered right to your door. They don't even roast the beans until you make your order. They've got teas as well, flavored coffees, regular coffee. Be sure to hit them up. plainscoffee.com. Promo code BRAVES. Should be easy to remember. Get your 10% off. All right, so you mentioned the Marlins. Before we get to pitching matchups with the Marlins coming to town, let's talk about Vines a little bit. And since he had 2 chances to get out there on the hill for the Braves in his time up, went a little over 4 innings the first time around, went 6 tonight or Sunday night,
5,
and was able to. I don't think he looked bad. I think that they were kind of sitting on that elevated changeup, and they ended up hammering it a couple of times and putting it out of the ballpark.
So I made this point on Twitter during the game. And by the way, if you're not following me and you want to do that to see some of this stuff, on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. But Vines, the sequencing was weird here, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So in the first 3 innings, and I'm pulling up my notes real quick, it was almost entirely change-up fastball.
Right.
Now, he was locating the fastball well. Like that helped. He was, for the most part, dotting the corners with them. But it was probably 2/3 changeup, 1/3 fastball early, and then he threw like 2 sliders in there.
And to me, his velocity was up a little bit, Lindsay. I thought. Didn't he hit 94, 95 a couple of times?
No. Velocity is up year over year, but he's still below average as far as MLB average because it's gone higher now. I think it was like 91, 92 in this one. I have to go pull the exact numbers, but it was something like that. But he so against Houston, he threw 29 four-seamers, 21 cutter slider, whatever you want to call it, 21 changeups, and 9 curveballs. Today was almost entirely changeup four-seam. Like it was 34 changeups, 29 four-seams, and then 11 total breaking balls. StatCast read 7 as the slider, 4 as the cutter. I think by the end of the night, they're going to reclassify some of those. I'm just going to say 11 breaking balls. So the pitch mix was different. And like you mentioned, he kind of got victimized when a changeup got left up. So Evan Carter's solo shot in the 3rd, that was middle, outer 3rd, right? So, middle of the zone horizontally, outer 3rd gets rocked. The Andrew, I can never say his name. Kisner? Yep. Andrew Kisner, 3-run homer. First pitch, so he ambushed it.
Yeah,
but change up and in, right? Like still over the plate, but inner 3rd and up top of the zone. And I just don't feel like change up in the top of the zone is the place you want to leave that. And
Well, and I
so
think Kisner was up there looking change because of the sequence. I think he was sitting on change up, and he got a bread and butter pitch on the very
yeah.
first one.
I mean, he was throwing some first pitch changeups. He threw changeup more than anything else. Almost 50% of his pitches were changeups tonight. But I think that big thing was, one, elevating it instead of burying it down, and then just maybe a little too predictable with the sequencing because he wasn't throwing some of the other pitches. It was just heavy changeup fastball. I'm assuming they saw something in the scouting that said this should work, and it would have worked if the location was better, but when his locations got up like that, they started to rocket. I would have loved to see, and maybe there's an explanation here, I would have loved to see a little bit more of, a little bit more of the slider, the cutter, a little bit more of the curveball that we know he has, something like that. And so I'm gonna give him a C for the outing. It wasn't awful. It's not bad enough where you were gonna where he was the reason you lost this game. And then his offense did not really show up that well. They didn't have a hit from the end of the third until I think the seventh or eighth inning. But
left a lot of guys on too. I mean,
it's all that's all, and that's all in the takeaways. I've got the notes there. I think it was hang on. It's right here. 2 for 7 with runners in scoring position, stranded 5 runners on base, and got 3 base runners after the first inning until they had that late rally in the 8th that died. They had a single in the 2nd from Chadwick Tromp. Kelnick walked in the 4th. Ozuna walked in the 6th. But Lorenzen gives up 3 in the 1st, doesn't give up any more the rest of his outing. So Vines gets a C. It's passable, but you can't win when the offense doesn't pick him up. It wasn't a good enough outing to win on his own. It was good enough to win with an offense behind him. He didn't have offense behind him, so C.
Yeah, I thought Cone said it best from the booth where he said, he'd mentioned the sequencing too, but he said, I got no problem with the change. He said, he's just got to get it down there around the knees because those guys were clearly hitting. Some of them were hard ground balls, but he said those guys were clearly hitting a lot of ground balls on anything that was basically below the waist, and he kept leaving it up. And of course, you saw what happened whenever he did so. So I think C's a good grade. I give him probably a C plus overall. Even I think he did the same thing on his last outing. I think he's just got some adjustments to make, and he'll be just fine. I mean, he's going to be good to call up a little bit later on in the year. I think he can definitely fill a void, so we shall see. Well, speaking of pitching, probables, we got some movement that's going to be going on as the Marlins come to town, and that is going to be Bryce Elder has been called up. You had called this on the last pod. You'd mentioned it at bravestoday.com last week. He was probably the next guy headed in this direction. Sure enough, as soon as Sunday night's game is over, Vines is optioned back to AAA Gwinnett. Elder is called up. And so here we are, and they're going to go ahead and throw him right in the rotation in the fire right away.
Yeah, and this is all thanks to Gwinnett's game getting rained out on Sunday because Elder was the scheduled starter for that day. If that game does not get rained out, this doesn't happen probably unless they choose to scratch him Sunday morning. But with the rain out, he gets called up, so he pitches on Monday. And then what this does, this lets you kind of adjust and move some guys around. So Max Fried goes to Tuesday. Ronaldo Lopez now goes to Wednesday. So Lopez has pitched all 3 of his outings have been on Tuesdays. So he's been getting 2 extra days of rest every week.
Yep.
This moving him to Wednesday, he gets an additional day of rest now. So he gets plenty of rest on this. And then this means Chris Sale, who was announced as the Wednesday starter originally on regular rest, will now pitch on Friday for the series opener against Cleveland, and that will be 2 additional days of rest. So you're this is what Atlanta's been doing. They're just building in extra rest days, using the off day, using a call up here in this case to try to get these guys some additional time off. One, you don't have optionable relievers, so you really can't, pull up an extra guy to start. You have to do something with your rotation, in this case with Vines. But then 2, my hope is that Atlanta can build in enough rest days like this for Lopez and for Sale, Lopez especially, where you don't have to stick him in the pen later in the year. Because he pitched 180 innings as a starter, but he's not gone past 60 in the last couple of years because he's been a reliever. And a jump of more than about 50 innings isn't really realistic year over year. And so It looks like they're going out of their way to try to give him extra rest, not throw him maybe more than once a week in hopes that they can let him start for as long as possible, because he's been Atlanta's best starter on the year, which is not the thing I thought we'd be saying
Right.
when the season started. I had him as the 4th or 5th best starter entering the year, not the best starter entering the year.
And as far as the Marlins go, we don't know who we're going to be getting on the final game of the series because they have yet to announce it yet. But
Yes.
Weathers Rogers, is that what you told me earlier?
Yeah, Ryan Weathers on Monday, lefty. Trevor Rogers on Tuesday, also a lefty. Having pretty decent years for both of them. The Wednesday spot, it's a TBD because that would have been AJ Puck. He was a reliever for them last year. They converted him to starting. It has been bad.
Yeah, it's been brutal.
It's been brutal. But he was dealing with it was like right shoulder fatigue after the last start where he got blown up and they put him on the IL. So that's his spot. They called a prospect up as the 27th man for Saturday's doubleheader. Roderick Munoz, former Atlanta Brave prospect.
How about that?
Made his MLB debut. We'll see what happens. My camera apparently turned off. I apologize. I don't know what happened there. Made his MLB debut there, and he may be the guy. We don't know what's going to happen for Wednesday, so we don't have that yet. But 2 lefties in games 1 and 2.
I'm going to go ahead and make my pick. My pick is, there you go. My pick is another sweep, and I say that just because I think that the Braves are still going to be scoring runs. I think it's getting about the time that Olson probably busts out of his slump a little bit. I think some balls start to fall for Kelnick. I think Ozuna absolutely owns the Marlins, whether we're playing them in Miami, in Atlanta, or if we decide to play them in Antarctica. I think Ozuna absolutely owns the Marlins. So between just those guys in the lineup, the rest of the guys have been fairly solid. And so we shall see. So I'll go ahead and I'll pick the sweep this time around. Probably wouldn't be doing this if the Marlins were playing a little bit better this season. And when I say a little bit, just a tiny bit better. But I do think that with Fried going and with Lopez going, as you talked about, Lopez has been the best pitcher we've had thus far. Yeah. And Fried looked better the last time out. And so if Elder can come up and just get the ball across the plate and throw some ground balls and the guys score some runs, we should get 3 victories.
I wanted to go with the sweep. 1, I think you called it 2. So I'm going to say 2-1. I don't know which game you're going to drop, simply because I called the sweep when they went to Miami and it didn't happen. So I'll say 2-1. That way they get the sweep. But either way, I've got Atlanta winning this. Not even knowing who's going to throw for Miami on Wednesday. I've seen they're 6-17. I've seen 15 of those 23 games. They're not a good team.
Yeah,
I really think Atlanta should sweep them, but baseball's weird. So I'm going to say 2-1, even though I want it to be a sweep and I secretly think it's going to be. I'm going to say 2-1.
We're going to have another pod prior to Wednesday for sure. But just in case you guys are wondering, it's a weird Wednesday matchup because it is a night game on Wednesday. It's not a getaway day. Both teams are off on Thursday. So you'll get 3 night games as far as the Marlins and Braves are concerned this week.
Honestly kind of cramps the style a little bit. I enjoy those Wednesday afternoon day games. Those are nice. Like, all of my meetings are done in the morning. I like those day games, but
I did too, especially in college. The Kevin Millwood days. Absolutely loved the Wednesday games. They were fantastic. Drinking beer in the afternoon is fantastic. At a ballpark, skipping class, it was awesome. Watching Kevin Millwood grow his career before he moved on.
There you
go. So if you want to find out more, go to Braves Today. BravesToday.com is where you can find all the written work. Lindsay's already got takeaways up from this weekend series. Also some articles up taking a look at what we can expect out of Elder with him getting the nod on a Monday. Also be sure to go to plainscoffee.com and enter the promo code Braves. Get your 10% off and buy yourself some coffee, tea, or anything else that they may have on the site as well. Lindsay, as always, I greatly appreciate your time, sir.